Okay, what we're going to do today is look at this terminology, I guess, that's used in archaeology quite a bit. It's called Potnia Theron. Potnia Theron is a Greek term, but like so many terms and words for everything in the ancient world, it's all Greek to me, right? If you look, it says that it actually means something like animal mistress or the mistress of animals. It's a widespread motif in ancient art from the Mediterranean world and the ancient Near East, showing a central human or human-like female figure who grasps two animals, one to each side. Although the connections between images and concepts in the various ancient cultures concerned remain very unclear, such images are often referred to by the Greek term Potnia Theron, regardless of culture or origin. In other words, if they find something that looks like this same symbology in another place other than Greece, they're going to still use this symbology on it. Well, if you do comparative type religions and so on and get deep enough into it, you'll find this ancient symbology that they talk about actually goes back way, way later or earlier than even they're going to speak about here. But it's a great starting point. I've only mentioned this term probably 2 or 3 times. I did a video on ancient Venus figurines and how old that goes back. Now, the tens of thousands of years, and how they first were a heavy-set woman and so on, and it was widespread everywhere. And then, like I was talking in so many of my other videos, that there is a widespread knowledge that goes back many tens of thousands of years, and that was one of the ways that they could see it, is that all of these people were doing the same type of thing. It couldn't be convergence. It had to have been contact. And everybody's like, oh, well, no, people in the ancient days, they just stayed at home and maybe never went past the hill that's next to them. You go, really? Because they found so many artifacts that are over here and over there, and the big pottery guys are always fighting about, well, was this, somehow mercantile in nature, or did these people come over here, or did they have some exchange? Is this mercantile trade, or is it actually this, that, and the other? And it actually, really, because it's so old, it takes genetics to finally turn around and go, oh yeah, that's the same people, or not. The term is first used by Homer as a descriptor of Artemis. And so we know of Artemis and Diana, and she's the god of the hunt, and um, she's the goddess of wilderness, wild animals, the moon, and chastity. The goddess Diana is her Roman equivalent we've talked about, but also how that is Inanna. And in so many ways, there's actually a version of this type of person in all of these ancient cultures too. This girl that in herself here has a deer, and it's a different type symbology, but you see that deer symbology a lot in the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and you see it caught through here, but also you see that same deer symbology way over in Western Europe. In other places, you'll see it as an ibex and so on, so it's really pretty much what's there at the time. But we've made connections with Diana and Inanna, Ishtar, and even Venus, and so you can see that's the same type of thing carried through. And you go, well, she's a girl, and this, that, and the other, and the Venus statues are a heavy lady. I'm here to tell you now, if you've seen enough of life, just to be straightforward about it, quite often a girl that will look like this in her teens, after having children and doing everything, will become a heavy-set woman as a mother. And that Venus symbology was a sacred mother symbology that goes on. And in fact, it denotes itself by that. You understand? So, Homer used it in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and is often used to describe female divinities associated with animals. But it generally works that way. Well, of course, this Theron goes with that. The word Potnia, meaning mistress or a lady, was a Mycenaean Greek word. So this is the Mycenaean people. See what they show here. Inherited by the classical Greeks. So it's a loan word, what a lot of people call a loan word. And it was with the same meaning and cognate to the Sanskrit patni. So that's more of a female version of pater or patar or Peter, and that's father. Like Dios patar ends up being Jew patar, right? So Potnia means a mistress or a lady, but it's generally looked at as a deified situation. But then they don't talk about the other part of that, the Theron. You know, like Charlize Theron, the actress. Well, I used to have a customer, that was his name, and I thought that was weird. And I like it when people have something unique in names. I tried to somewhat pick names for my daughters that were a little bit unique and not just, bland names. Um, but also use a family trait in there that we constantly did. But Theron means hunter. And in some cases, it almost means warrior. For they use it in that term almost subjectively. Now you'd say, well, guys that are great warriors, of course, are dudes that are out that are great with the hunt too, probably. Well, yeah, okay, people said that a long time ago, but it almost means warrior. So this Diana the huntress is actually a warrior. This is a similar to an Amazon concept, Valkyries, if you will. But also it says it's cognate with patni. This also shows you the old classical Greek and Mycenaean words from way back when come from a common root in the languages that they speak even today, but it's spread out more. But as you go back a few steps, it starts being quite cognate to each other, and it only takes a few steps back, and you end up having that supposed Babel situation where people can all pretty much understand each other. But again, we're looking in the Wayback Machine into that situation too. The oldest such depiction they have of the full Potnia Theron is the seated woman of CatalHoyuk. I'll show you a picture in a second. It's a clay sculpture from CatalHoyuk, and this is in modern Turkey, what we call Turkey today, or what is known as Anatolia, or Asia. Asia Minor is what its name and nomenclature goes for. CatalHoyuk is a very large Neolithic and Chalcolithic proto-city of some of the very first of it. The settlement in Anatolia, which exists from approximately 7100 BC to 5700 BC and flourished around 7000 BC, so it really almost sprouts up out of nowhere, by the way. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but if you look at this is squared off buildings, supposedly out of nowhere. Like popcorn again, we have that situation, but if you look, they're all lined up. In fact, the long wall that's all lined up with stuff, and I'm guaranteeing you that lines up with sacred geometry and stars and where the sun comes up and things like that. We've talked about it before, but you can't really make it out. The picture's too far off, but those walls are made out of little bricks. And I quite often said once they started making bricks, they realized if they just sun dry them, of course, they rot away real quick. These never rotted away real quick. They held pretty good. And I've said that, well, somebody that makes the hearth, the fire, the pizza oven of its day, if you will, are going to use bricks around in the thing, but then those are going to cook and actually go through a thing like a brick. And I quite often thought whenever they build and rebuild it, somebody said, hey man, these things are, bow. So then they took that same pizza oven and started cooking the clay bricks in it. It kind of does a magic. Yeah, magic of the day. Like whenever you can turn a goop into a solid stone like concrete, which involves Cretan ash from Crete. That's concrete with Crete. That's where you get it from Latin. Well, these aren't concrete type bricks. They're the ones that use clay and so on like that. And people can look at these clays and tell you where they came from. Well, it's all pretty much locally here, but what's weird is some of that pottery is not necessarily local that they find, and some of these figurines aren't either. So the oldest depiction we have is the seated woman of CatalHoyuk. It's a clay sculpture in modern Turkey made about 6000 BC. So it was after it was already going real good. They find it dated there. Well, it's very floated when you have something like that happen. But this motif is more common in later Near Eastern and Mesopotamian art with a male figure called the Master of Animals or the Master of Beasts. Now, when you look at Mesopotamian art, you'll see this here, and this is a Ubaid type, early Sumerian type culture, and you find a heavy-set woman, but she's presenting her breasts, but they're enlarged, and she's an enlarged woman too. This is a adaptation that comes out of the idea of the sacred mother, milk, all this situation comes from this. And if you look, she's kind of striped, painted a little bit. Of course, it's mostly worn off, but you can see it. What's weird is that's done on with dark red ochre, but it's very much like, Conan the Barbarian in part 2, whenever he stripes himself up, which you'd think it looks kind of like camouflage or somewhat. And of course, that red ochre painting goes way, way back. Well, how far back? Well, they found red ochre setup and everything in a big shell and all this stuff that they had made in Blombos Cave at 100,000 BC, but I think last year they redated it at 93, so we're at 2000 AD, so that's 95,000 years ago instead of 100. So how far does it go back? Well, it goes back a long way. So this painting people up and stuff that you see in some of the other depictions and ideas, like Land of the Cave Bear and things like that, probably went on for many tens of thousands of years. We're really not going to find too much of it, but all this painting that's going on the walls is using this. Did they ever paint each other? Because eventually they started tattooing each other. And that can be found from Utsi the Iceman to Egypt to Middle East to the Scythians to just all over the place. We've talked about that in quite a few videos too. So Mesopotamian art, and there's a Venus type statue, but this Master of Beasts or Master of Animals that they show here, let's see if we can get here he's choking 2 ducks or 2 geese, right? And it looks somewhat Egyptian, looks somewhat India-ish, especially with the snake-ish looking coils that's coming around it, medallions hanging and so on, and then behind him at knee height there are flanking him and one behind him are a Horus type sun god with a sun statue. Master of Animals or Lord of the Beasts or Lord of Animals is a motif in ancient art showing a human between grasping 2 confronted animals. It's very widespread in the art of ancient Near East and Egypt. Figures usually a male, but not always. The animals may be realistic or fantastical. So you might see something that's ducks and geese, but you might find other things where it looks like the guy's just holding back lions. In fact, that lion is a common motif. And we've talked about lions just a separate one, and how all of Northern Europe used to have lions, and even into North America, and along with saber-toothed tigers and stuff. But it all got killed off at the Younger Dryas situation, and the only place we find tigers is, well, you can still find them from Siberia on down. And there's been some conjecture, if you know what a liger is, that perhaps the lion that's maneless, like a liger is, but huge, bigger than a normal, even tiger, that's the size of the lion that was there in ancient days. And looks like it would have been perhaps a cross, but they use this lion. Oh, you can see it in Gilgamesh, you can see it in Sumerian art, you can see it in here and here and here, and it's this master of beasts. But you look at the ancient Minoans and people around in there, and there's this lady, and she's holding up two snakes. Well, snakes have a lot to do with this too. It's not just a master of poisons and things like that. For snakes were sacred at times, special to certain people. And like in the Gilgamesh story, it has a thing with rebirth, that they can just shed their skin and da da da, which leads on to a modern form of rebirth. But the Gibeller knife at very first, and people are saying this is the formation of Egypt itself, and it might have to do with Narmer just as much as the palette and everything does, where they have Hathor already out, but look at this symbology. They even have the cylinder seal discs and things like that. It's why I've made so many connections to what really founded it going on. And for a long time there's a fight of where did it happen first and everything. Well, it's Sumerians, and the cuneiform type languages is there very early, and they're like, oh, well, that was trade and this, that, and the other. So people were going back and forth. But you only want to let it go to that certain point. Back to it here. Homer's mention of Potnia Theron refers to Artemis, or Diana. Walter Burkett describes this mention as a well-established formula. An Artemis-type deity, a mistress of the animals, is often assumed to have existed in prehistoric religion and often referred to as Potnia Theron, with some scholars positing a relationship between Artemis and goddesses depicted in Minoan art. Well, let's see what they give us in Minoan art. Oh, there's a nice jug there. And that's kind of done in reverse, where it looks like they whitewashed the whole thing and then they only painted the black parts of it. If you look at the swirls and the S that's a symbol on there, and that's kind of a half of a swastika, a bit of a yin yang and things, and it really probably contains the same iconography and meanings onto it, but it's also Atlantean colors. We don't want to get into all of that though. But so prehistorically in religions and stuff, well, I'm going to show you that it goes back way much further than that. Well, I'll just tell you about it somewhat, but I guess first what we want to do is see if I can show you this picture here. This is the Venus that we were talking about before, and the heavy-set woman, so on. But she's sitting flanked by lions. And this has been found in quite a few places that nobody wants to connect, but they go, well, there must be a connection that either is constant or goes back before each one is established. And they want to hem and haw away from either one of those, and you can understand why. So there's the earliest depiction. That's the CatalHoyuk woman, right? And if we look here, here's another one where it's got these lionesses here, and she's got the sprig of, I don't know what that is, grapes or something coming out of her head, and the two lions that she's held on, the kids that are holding on to her, and you can see their little green dents and all the squaring that's done of the clothing and everything there too. I'll square it off, and her braided hair and all the situation going on. The little crown is, what is this? This is, well, it's kind of Mother Nature. And you, what? Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Well, how does that go together? Well, hey, women go through a lot of things in their life, and they start out looking like Diana in that picture right there. And due to the motherhood and such a situation, they actually kind of get back kind of big. And believe me, especially in times of drought and so on, if you could keep a woman looking healthy, that really said something. People at one time had pride in the situation, not that they were obese, like she almost looks there, not here at all, really, but that you could get to that point. It was showing a sign of wealth and prosperity, and of course, like during a time of drought and things, that would become much more exaggerated. And so it seems like they almost dropped that super heavy situation. And also at that time, it maybe have started to look down upon fat people or something. You know, they couldn't run as fast, ha ha ha, or something. And next thing you know, it was taken out of the iconography. But here's another one done in ivory. And you can see her flanking on the other side. And then there's the birds up top and so on. Yeah, long dress. And here's a plate giving the same type of iconography with the two ducks and everything. But if you'll look right down here or right down here, that's that sacred swastika. It's kind of the Greek form of it. That's what it is, and that's what it means. But she's also an angel, isn't she? Yeah, so that iconography and that idea we've talked about a lot of times goes back to a lot of different people, but isn't she Isis? And through one of these cultures in the Wayback Machine, weren't they doing a ballerina pose that was mimicking Isis later with her wings? And this ballerina pose I've showed goes up into primordial Europe, the Wayback Machine too. Well, this is a plate here, but it's a Priyan pottery of 675 to 600 BC. Artemis as the Mistress of Animals. So let's go back to the first, or the original document here. An early example of Italian Potnia Theron is in the Museo Civico Archeologico di Monte Rinaldo in Italy. A plate illustrates a goddess that wears a long dress and holds hands with two lionesses. See what they show with lionesses? It's just a lion, a male lion, not even a lioness. In the Aeneid, Virgil mentions that inside of Psychro's cave in Crete lived the goddess Cybele, whose chariot was drawn by two lions. Well, before the time of horses coming into the area, which really goes along with the Trojan War and things like that, the horse. And then later into Egypt and so on. Didn't take too long. From these northern people, they had different things pulling their chariots, and then all of a sudden it's horses pulling them. If you look at it, it would be rams with Ramsey and Saturn and so on, and you're like, what is all of this? Even Thor is drawn in the same situations. And really ends up looking like a Santa Claus thing in a lot of them too, especially ones that have deer on them and everything, and you're like, this looks like kind of, yeah, it does, doesn't it? For a reason. Psychro's Cave, show me a picture of it. Well, not really so much. It's just showing like this one part over here of stalagmites that are built in a concretion or a buildup. But Cybele, here's her. And no, she isn't a fat woman really anymore and everything. And of course, this is in Greek art, and you look at the way her clothing and that gossamer silk or fabric is not silk at this time really, floating all around on her. How well they did it. But also, you can see that there is a cat below her. That's a lion. And she's huge if that's a lion, right? Well, if you think of that as being a house cat too, and that being mom becoming grandma, she's got a house cat that hangs around her and everything. It doesn't seem too out of place. She's an Anatolian mother goddess. May have been a possible forerunner in the earliest Neolithic at CatalHoyuk. Yeah, we were just talking about that. Where statues of plump women, sometimes sitting, have been found in excavation. Phrygia's only known goddess, she was probably its national deity. Greek colonists in Asia probably adopted it in as being the same one and the same as each other. And so when you see that adoption of that, and then Romans and stuff, and everybody put that together, they teach you that in school real easy, that Greeks and Romans, and they go together and stuff, and this one's that, and this one's that, and they teach you actually cross-reference of it, or I did. You know, Hermes is Mercury, and he's the messenger, and all the things that go along with that. But if you get into it, it really, he's not just a messenger. Wow. There's a lot of other things go with it. And a lot of them are Aesop's fable stories and things like that, but a lot of them also secretly hold other wisdom inside of it. It's like the Bible does and things like that. It's like that swastika that's shown right there. So, oh, never showed this picture right here, but if we look at this, this is the ancient Minoans, isn't it? Yeah, Minoans got us two lines. Yeah, notice that they've got tufted puffs on the end of their tails, right? It almost looks like dogs or something. No, well, that's lions. And here's the mountain drawn just like Sumerians are drawn. And that's Minoans. And how can you tell? Well, that's that cow's head horns that they had from way back in the time of Taurus and bulls. But the two are around her in that same situation. This can be found in the Sumerians again and all of the ancient Caucasian cultures that heralded civilization that's here. It's a goddess type here, but or a helper in some way, but this again is a goddess. This is probably on a medallion or a brooch type thing that's only going to be about the size of a golf ball all carved into it. I don't know, but there are a lot of them that look like that. In fact, come to mind about the one that looks like Santa Claus. They found one that is indeed that's in this big old ring. Yeah, it looks like a glass ring or so on. But you can see her here in this classic dress, and she's topless or whatever, and her hair's back in a braid or a pullback, ponytail type thing, if you will, in the style of the Minoans that are here, and she's holding out forth the staff, but quite often this same thing is shown, and she's got one out to the left, one out to the right, and instead of it being a staff, is a snake. So we have that same symbology in the Master of Beasts and this concept that's carried on. Now this was just redone here in September of this year, 29th of September. That's what I like. So many of these are being updated with connectives here that they didn't have recently. But all the way from Venus statues, which predate this by quite some date. They talk about 6,000, perhaps 7,000 BC, 9,000 years ago. Well, we found that plump Venus statue 3 times that age that's going on, so it's all carried back. In fact, there's that effigy that's done in wood that is a lion-headed man. and it's archaic dating. They go way, way back. Of course, there's no lions in it now. Well, just before that, in those Cro-Magnon caves and stuff that we've got going on, they've got the lions there and the horses and things, but it's done in an artistic standpoint that some of the great artists, when they looked at it, they said, well, we haven't invented anything, have we? Because they were doing this representation way back when. So to keep a woman healthy was quite something, especially through times of drought and so on, and it really was a symbol of things, just like red ochre males and pale women. It's a symbology that you see in Egypt all the way through, and Minoans, Etruscans, the Mitanni people, and the Greeks, where you'll see people all tanned up and the women are kept pale. Well, once they have it all established and going on, the women can be a mother, and this type of thing can happen. She no longer has to toil. They try to keep her fair and so on. So you can see that in Egypt art, but same symbology, drawn somewhat a little different in those Minoans, in the Greeks, all through Anatolia, and the people of this time. But that Venus statue and that concept of a mother of a hearth goes way back. So let's talk about hearths again. We were discussing that here before I went off in left field twice. But this pizza oven that makes the bricks and so on goes on, for eventually this mother becomes a grandmother. And quite sadly, but really even you can see it to this day, quite often it's grandma that's still around and grandpa's gone. Right? That's kind of normal. And back then it kind of would have been even more normal. For she got to be kept inside somewhat and this, that, and the other, and then he went out and did stuff. Man, you can get an infection and take you out. Get sick and things like that. Where others it wouldn't really be happening. But also she keeps the home fire hearths burning. And so she was the hearth queen. Funny how if you take the H off a hearth, it becomes earth. And she was the mother goddess of the earth. She was Mother Nature. You hear about Mother Nature and like, that's the primordial goddess of everything. Well, who is this? Well, it's the progenitor goddess. She's grandma, but she's great grandma. Yeah, because she's always been in that place, because she's always in that place. Well, yeah, but she's different, and she had a grandma. Yes, she did, and you do too, see? And so on, and you're going to have kids, and then your mom is grandma. See how that works out? Isn't that amazing? Just like Venus can be drawn as a juvenile and a maiden, and later be drawn as a mother, and later be drawn as a matron, and kept healthy and doing fantastic. Master of Beasts. So it goes way back before they even put all the stuff together here, and I applaud them for putting together CatalHoyuk and the whole things they have here, because they usually don't do that. But you can take this woman out of the chair, and in art, she becomes the matron that's making the bird symbology, and the ballerina, just like Swan Lake. That's what comes to mind is whenever they go da-da-da with their arms, you know, ballerina pose. And you have this other variant here, who are put together and concepted the same thing as Diana Inanna, the fair maiden, love and everything, and nature, and then the change of the seasons is caused by her passing and being able to come back and forth. And Easter, and well, that's for another video. I've already done a few on, but wait till Easter comes around again, I'll kick that. Hell, we're headed towards the holidays of Halloween and Thanksgiving and then Christmas, so expect some about that. Like, share, subscribe, and enjoy, guys. We'll get on to another one. Peace.